Thank you very much. Thank you for having me again. Let me begin showing my screen here. Okay, so for those that doesn't know me, my name is Carlos Serrano. I'm a Puerto Rican living in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been working with data for over 10 years. My career started as a network and system administrator. Then I switched as a DBA, DBE, and now I'm a senior solutions architect at Snowflake since December 2021. I've been working with the Snowflake platform for almost 3.5 years, and I am Snowflake Core and Advanced Architect certified. I'll be talking today about Snowflake, but not only Snowflake, we're going to focus a little bit more on the Streamlit side. What is Streamlit? I think that there's been a lot of hype in the community about Streamlit since its acquisition by Snowflake. Let me start by saying Snowflake bought Streamlit, but Streamlit is still open source. You can use the Python library free. You can host it yourself using Docker, Kubernetes, EC2 instances, you name it. And it's still free. If you want to use any of the cloud technologies from Streamlit, then there's a paid subscription that you can go with. So what is Streamlit? So let me show you real quick Streamlit's website. Streamlit is as easy as writing Python to visualize and create apps. A lot of people say, oh, Streamlit is to create dashboards. No, Streamlit is to create apps. You can actually create fully functional apps that interact with your data on top of Python and just using Python, nothing else. Yes, you can use different components within Streamlit that allows you to write Markdown, data frames, etc. But mostly it's a data app visualization tool. Okay, you can learn more about it by going to streamlit.io. And if you go to streamlit.io and you click where it says docs, their documentation is really complete. You can go through the API reference and you can see how to interact with the entire Streamlit gallery. Okay, so how the Streamlit works. Let's start by seeing the requirements. In this example, I'm going to be using very few libraries. I'm going to be using Streamlit. I'm going to be using Pandas, and I'm going to be using the Snowflake Python connector. Toml is a type of configuration file that I like to use for my apps. And Altair is a visualization package that actually you can use inside Streamlit as an extension. We might get to Altair, might not. We're gonna have an introductory introduction, and if there's time, we'll go through some advanced functionality. If you have any question throughout the process, please let it in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat to see any questions regarding it. So how do we get started? It depends on how do you like to set up your virtual environments in Python. My preferred method is Conda. I like using Anaconda. So what I did initially is that I did a Conda create, and I provided a name MD for Magna Data, and then I created in Python 3.9. Once I create my environment, I do a Conda activate MD, and I activated my Conda environment, and I ran a pip install -r. So I did a pip. Let me go to this screen. I did a pip install -r, and then I said requirements.txt. That will install every single package that I specify in this file. And that's the way that I initialize my environment. After that, I can just work. If you are new to Streamlit, you can do a quick check by doing Streamlit hello. And when you do a Streamlit hello, that is going to start a sample app inside the library that will tell you if your application is, if your package is well installed. So once that happens, if Streamlit starts successfully, you get the Streamlit hello. And in the Streamlit hello, you actually have some demos that you can go through and analyze the code. One of the cool things about these demos is that you can actually click here and see the setting and go straight to the documentation for each of these demos directly. Okay. If your Streamlit hello works appropriately, we can go directly and do a Control-C. That will stop that instance of Streamlit running locally on my computer. and we can start coding.
Carlos, just one little thing. Is there any chance that you can make the font a little bit bigger?
Yes, I can. I can do it. Give me a second. Is that better?
It looks better to me.
Awesome. Yes, I always forget that I have a huge screen. So let's talk about how I'm going to use Streamlit. What do we want to do? Well, the first thing that we want to do is connect to Streamlit, connect to Snowflake. For this matter, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do a Streamlit run, and I'm going to say app.py, and this app.py is the name of my Python file. So I'm going to say I want Streamlit to run app.py, and I have only imported Toml, Streamlit, Pandas, the Snowflake connector, and datetime because we're going to be doing some things with datetime. Okay. When I execute this command in your terminal, this is going to start Streamlit on your local host. Well, right now there's nothing. There's a blank page. We haven't developed a single thing. What's the first thing that we need? Is probably a sidebar to connect to Snowflake. So let's do a sidebar. If you see here, we loaded that library as an ST, with an alias of ST. First of all, we have a question. It says, is it within the scope to talk about why Carlos is using pip to install the requirements with Conda? I use pip as my default installer. I prefer pip because I feel like it's a little bit easier to manage than Conda. I use Conda as my environment manager, but I use pip as my package installer. I feel like it's more cross systems than using Conda. If I am going to deploy that code somewhere else, pip comes with Python natively. Whether if I'm going to deploy this in a Docker, I will have to install Conda if I'm going to use Conda installer. So just to keep things kind of global, I use pip for the installer and Conda just for environment management. You can use PyEnv for environment management if you're more comfortable with it. So going back, I know that I need probably a sidebar. I can come here and say, okay, I want to define a sidebar, and I'm going to say that my sidebar equals st.sidebar, and st.sidebar is a component for Snowflake. And I know that this is my sidebar. And let's see what happens here. Nothing is going to happen right now. And sidebar is not a function, it's just a decorator. So nothing is going to happen because I declare that sidebar, but there's nothing yet on it. So to connect to Snowflake, I need a few pieces of information. So now let's say with sidebar, and let's say, okay, we need account. And I'm going to say that account equals st.text text input. And I'm going to say that this is account. Right? And other than account, I need username. So I'm going to say username equals st.text input. And I'm going to say that this is going to be username. And let's do a password. Say password equals st.text input. And I want password. But password needs an extra character. So I say is or password. It's password. So every time that you start a new component, you're gonna get all the callables that you can see here. And one of the decorators that you need to see is whether you're going to do a password or what type of what type of decorator you're gonna use. So we're gonna go back to the password in a second. So let's see those three fields. Now we have used with sidebar, and we are saying inside the sidebar, I want to create these three items. But what happens? If you see here, I have st text input, and I have 3 input text. Right away, this code will fail because it's gonna try to create 3 identical components that have no key differentiating them. So if I go here and I rerun my code, well, they are inside the sidebar, so it's different. But if I was generating multiple text inputs without the account equal, it will fail immediately because it's trying to create 3 identical things. So now I created 3 text boxes. I have account password, I have, and I'm gonna drag something here so I can see the comments. So I have an account, I have a username, and I have a password. Okay. So now I'm gonna go back here and I'm gonna say type equals password. And what this does is that now if I rerun my code, now you see that has a little, now when I write, all you're gonna get are the discrete dots so you don't show the text that you type in there. So there's 2 options, there's default and there's password. So now we have account, username, password. We need a couple more things. We need the role probably. So we're gonna say role equals, and I'm gonna do the same thing that I've been doing for this. I'm just gonna copy and paste text here, because this is how we do most of the time. And I'm gonna say role, I'm gonna say WH for warehouse, and I'm gonna say that's equal here, warehouse, and I wanna provide a database, and I'm gonna say DB equals database. And let's see, we have account, warehouse, role, database, user, password. We have everything that we need to authenticate. So if I save here and I go back to my Streamlit app, we are gonna see that all the fields that I need are there. What else do I need? I need a button. So let's say here, st, let's say connect equals st dot button, and I wanna say connect to Snowflake. And I have now a button that I have created with my connect to Snowflake. So this is a very, very simple example of how quick and easy it is to start developing an interface using Streamlit. So yes, I'm gonna Geoff ask if we can take you to some of the code that we felt if it was not on the sidebar. I have an example of that in a minute. So now you have your sidebar. The sidebar in the latest version of Streamlit is resizable. So we are happy because it was not resizable before. So now we have account, username, password, role, warehouse, database, connect to Snowflake. Now we need to write a function for that. So I am going to define a function called connect to Snowflake. And in my function, is going to accept account, it's going to accept user, it's going to accept password, it's going to accept role, warehouse, and database, right? And inside that, I am going to use the Snowflake connector. So what I am going to do is that I'm going to say that my connection, I'm going to call it CTX, equals sf.connect. And basically what I'm going to do is now pass all of this information. So I'll start user equals user, and I'm going to say that account equals count. You can do this with a keyword argument if you would like to do it with keyword arguments. For the sake of today, I just don't want to go into keywording and everything else for the sake of keeping it simple and basic. Okay. Password equals PWD, role equals role. Let's call this one RL just to not confuse it, right? RL. And let's say that we have warehouse equals WH and database equals DB. And I should have everything right now as I want to. So now when I say that CS, which is my connection, equals ctx.cursor, and that opens a connection in Snowflake, okay? And I'm gonna return that connection. I'm gonna say CS. Now what I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna say, hey, on click, I want to execute connect to Snowflake. And usually I like to take all my functions and put them all the way up. It's just the way that I like to do my code. I want all my functions on top and my executable call, just in case that I'm gonna wrap this in a main. So I'm gonna say that my function is gonna be connect to Snowflake, and this is what is called a callback function. And a callback function is a function that happens before rerunning all the file. And I'm gonna explain rerunning the file in a minute, because when you do any action in Streamlit, it's actually rerunning that file completely again. And that is where session state and session management comes handy, okay? So I say that when I hit that button, I want to connect to Snowflake, and I want my arguments to be, and I'm gonna grab all of these guys. I'm gonna grab account, and you need to pass them on the same order that the function is expecting it. So user name, I need password, I need RL, role, I need warehouse, I use WH, and because I have my screen a little bit kind of big, I'm just going to put this here, so it's a little easier to see. I'm gonna say WH and then DB. So I have all my arguments. I'll say when I pass through, I want you to go and connect against Snowflake. How do we know if we connected to Snowflake? We need to kind of set a flag for it. And that is when I like to use session state. Pretty much I want to put something in cache that tells me you connected previously, and I can alter the behavior of my app with that. So what I'm gonna do is that here I'm gonna say st.session state is ready equals true, okay? So I'm setting a flag saying if you connected, set this flag in cache that is true. But this is like setting something that doesn't exist yet. So we have to initialize it somehow. So what I'm gonna do is say here, if is ready, not in st.session state, then st.session state is ready equals false. So if that flag doesn't exist yet, set it to false. That way it initiates as false. And now I'm gonna say if is ready, if session state is ready equals true, then I want to st.write a connected. Okay, so this all code, what it does is that if you go here, there's no visual aspect, but I'm gonna take an account, and I have this information here in a spreadsheet, so I don't mess with it. So I am gonna grab my account, which is, let me grab my full account. Okay, I have my username, SQL Insights. SQL Insights. Okay, I have my password. Let me grab my password from my notes here. I'm gonna be connecting as a sysadmin on the ETL WH role, and I wanna connect to my, let's connect to my conformed, or to my MD database, which is this database that exists here, okay? So we have our MD database, and I'm going to be connecting to this app. So now if I click connect to Snowflake, this is going to go and authenticate against Snowflake and tell me, hey, you connected. So this established a connection to Snowflake automatically. Okay. And I passed all that information there. So now I have my sidebar with the information. I connected to Snowflake. I can start querying data. So the connection right now, it's persistent in memory. You haven't disconnected. So I can go and do changes through my app and see how those changes affects the behavior because everything else is on that session. So let's go back to Python. So now I can say, hey, if session state is ready, let's define a query. So I'm gonna go here and say, hey, I want to define a function to write a query. I'm gonna define get data, and get data is gonna use my my connection. One of the things that I want to do is that I want to put my CS, my connection, I want to put it in session state. I want to do that just for the sake of keeping that connection in memory. So when I'm going to use it on my other functions, I don't have to authenticate it every single time. I want to keep that connection live and just reuse it all across. So I'm going to do get data, and get data is going to have a query. And that query, I have a preform query here that we want to use. And I'm going to do a select star from this view, right? Yes, I'm using a select star, so forgive me. Then what I want to do is I want to say, hey, results equals, and I'm going to grab this session state object that contains my data, right? And I'm going to say dot execute, because effectively this is my Snowflake connection right now. And I'm going to pass the query to this. And then I'm going to say, okay, now I want my results to be, to go query them. And then I want my results to be overridden by my session state dot fetch pandas all. And what I'm doing is that I am going to Snowflake and returning the data set of that into a pandas. And then I'm going to return my results. So now I know that I have my connection session state. I declare a query. And after I declare a query, I can now say, hey, if my connection is ready, I want to start querying data. So I'm going to remove this is ready. And I want to say, okay, so then data equals get data, right? And I want to do an st.data frame, and I want to pass data. As I want to pass the result of this. Because I made a function to my a change to my function, I'm going to hit connect again, just to put that information. If you see here, it says, hey, NoCon doesn't exist. This is a perfect example of when you call something on session state that doesn't exist yet. In this case, it was just because I needed to re-authenticate to put that in memory. But in this case, I think my app just halted. Let me see. Yeah. I think that my app just halted, and I'm pretty sure that that is a. Okay, so let me. This is exactly what I wanted to do this scenario, because these are things that are going to happen to you while you're writing this code. Your application is going to crash. You are going to do something that you shouldn't be doing. People insights. I'm going to do. The warehouse was ETL WH, and my database was MD. Okay, so I'm getting that segmentation error. So let me see, it must be here. me see. Let me just do the data and let's see something. I'm gonna start my app again. Any questions, please, on the chat. And like I said before, this was gonna be a fun session because we're gonna be doing this live. So this is the kind of things that happens. While I'll deal with this, any questions? Any questions from the chat? It's just not giving me the segmentation error before. And I tried it this morning. So let me see what I'm doing wrong here. I must be doing something. So I know what it is. Well, okay. Can we go through deploying via Docker? We could do that in a different class because that will go into the whole YAML and then the whole Docker compose aspect of it. So we will need a whole hour to create a Docker image and create everything needed. I can definitely provide some documents out there on how to do it. There's some documentation in Streamlit.io, especially on the Streamlit community website on how to do it. So there's definitely ways of doing it that way. So let me see what I must be doing something weird here where it is. So my cursor, my connection, and let me do a Streamlit version to make sure that I have the latest one. And this is something that you can do is just do a Streamlit version. Yes, we're working on the latest one. So let's check. I have my connection. Let's do a sample query. Let me do like one, just to confirm that my query is doing what I want. So let's do that connect one and make sure that it's not the query causing an issue. Now let's run this app. And let's say, scrap my account again. And I'm always copying this account because it's a long name. Google Insights, my password. And empty. Yeah, something is. So let me just comment this out.
You defined pandas as PD. So when you want to do panda stuff, why don't you just do PD dot something?
No, because we haven't started using the pandas yet itself. We are getting the information in a panda shape from Snowflake. So later in the demo, when we start doing transformations with the panda, we're going to be using PD dot, whatever. But in this case, we're first loading that data in a panda shape and then doing the rest of the stuff. So I'm pretty sure that this line is causing me issues. So let me just stop it here for a second. And I ran this the whole app that we're going to write today. I started doing it early in this morning and we were not running into this issue. So it's probably something that I did while typing. Let me see.
Yes, Ed,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Was that?
I saw Ed was raising a hand.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Okay, so let's print data. Okay, so yeah, it's the pandas fetch all giving me a hard time here. Done. Actually, let me do something here. Let me see. Let me see if that lets me do this. Yeah, it's that line causing the issue. So it was doing perfect like an hour ago. So SF Connect.
So it's good to see live troubleshooting, right?
Oh yeah,
Because
it is bound to happen.
Uh-huh.
It is bound to happen every time that you do this kind of things. So query. Okay, so result equals. Okay. Let me see why this is not behaving. And if not, we'll just switch gears. I have a way of switching gears. Let's do the thing again. And the raw is sysadmin, ETL, WH, and MD. Yeah, it's giving me that segmentation weirdness. So what I'm gonna do, I know the version that is causing this. So what I'm gonna do real quick here is I'm gonna stop my app, right? I'm gonna do I'm gonna do a conda create, and let's call it MD2, right? And name. This is a problem with Python 3.9. I have not had this problem with 3.8. And I'll say Python equals 3.8. I do a yes, this is installing all the packages. Then after it executes this transaction, I am going to do a conda activate, MD2, pip install, -r requirements.txt. This is going to install all the packages that are on that file. Once these packages are installed, I'm going to change my interpreter in Visual Studio Code to be the right conda environment as well. So now that this is installed, I am going to go here and find MD2, which is a Python 3. And I'm going to restart Streamlit app. And I'm pretty sure that that'll take care of it because I've been only having issues with 3.9. So let's do one more test. Do a copy. Let's do SQL Insights. And let's do sysadmin. This is ETL, WH, and this is MD. Okay, you see? 3.9, messing my day. So now we have a select star one. We have what we need. I'm going to do the original query. And when I'm doing my original query, that will mean that instead of doing the select one, I'm going to go and get all the information from this view. In this case, I don't need to refresh my page. All I have to do is do a rerun. So I don't have to reconnect to Snowflake. It's going to only run around the portion that doesn't affect that. So when I do this, this is now running that query against Snowflake, and it's going to bring me that data from Snowflake into my front end instead of in a shape of a data frame. If you want to see this data frame bigger, you can click here in this little arrows, and you can open the actual data frame and see the whole data in it. But this is not necessarily what we want to do. This is not what we want a visualization tool for, okay? Gio, before I forget, I cannot use PD read SQL because I am not passing that type of connection. I'm using the Python connector for Snowflake, which returns a specific shape that has to do a pandas fetch pandas all to read that shape into a pandas frame. If it was using SQL Server, maybe I will do a PD read SQL using Alchemy or something else. So if I have this way now, I want to start adding controllers and visualizations and things like that, right? So what I am going to do now is that I am going to go back and I'll say, okay, I want to know the minimum balance and the maximum balance. But I don't want every time that I run something, I don't want it to go and query that data from Snowflake again. So the first thing that I'm going to do is where it says get data, I'm going to put it at st.experimental memory, experimental memo. I think that it's already, yeah, experimental. Let's just do a cache. And I'm going to say suppress warning equals true, because I don't want a warning saying, hey, you're about to cache this. And I'll say that show spinner equals false. What this does is that now when I go here and I rerun my query, this is going to run one more time, but then it's going to put it in cache. Now, unless I specify to go to Snowflake, it is just going to use that query from memory. So from now on, it's not going to go and execute that query over and over and over against my Snowflake instance. I'm working with cache data. So let's do one thing. Let's add a slider. So I have my data. I'm going to remove my data from here now because I don't want to display it yet. So I want to say, hey, I want to get my balances. I want to know what is the minimum balance and what is the maximum balance. So I'm going to say my balances equals, and I'm going to do data net balance, which is the column. And I'm going to do a dog ag. And I'm going to do a min and a max. Right now, without me displaying any more data, I can do an st.write and st.write, and I can display those balances. I want to see which one is my maximum, which one is my minimum. If I rerun this, well, not st.write, st.data frame, because it's a frame. This is Visual Studio Code adding imports that I did not ask for. So now I see that my minimum balance is 500 and my maximum balance is 9,999 with 99. Because when I generated this data, I went from 500 to 10,000, but I forgot to put 10,000 on one, so it gave me 10,000. So now I know my values. What I can do with those values, I can now go and say, okay, I want min and max equals st.slider. And I want to say balance range. And on that slider, and I'm going to do this just for the sake of keeping things readable. I want to say that my main value is going to be a float You have to cast it as a float. Of balances min. And I want my max value to be the float of balances with the max. And I want my value to be an array of these two, because you want to provide where it's going to start and end. So I want min and I want my max. And what this is going to do is that when I go here now, when I rerun this thing, you get a slider where you can select your minimum balance and your maximum balance to use this as a filter for your visualizations and your data frame. So now with this set up, I can come here and I can say, okay, now I want to display a data frame. So I want to say data, but I want to say data.lock, for example, and I'm going to say data and net balance dot between min and max. And min and max are the values from the two slider controllers that are assigned to that slider controller. Okay. So now when I go here and I click rerun, oh, data log between min and max. Why are you complaining about that? Oh, I know what it is. This is just a simple tuple. So let me save this. And now, if I go and do this, this is going to filter my data set on the bottom. So I can add a slider to filter my data. And if you see, this is not going to Snowflake again. This is just querying the data that it's local on my cache. So if you're going to do data analysis, bring the data here. It has a maximum value of 200 and it's 200 megabytes, but there's way to buffering in disk while you bring it here and then dispatch it, for example. So when you rerun the app, you know, the things that haven't changed are going to be here. If you see things here disappeared, because I haven't persisted them. I haven't said this is this value is going to be completely in session state. So if a hard refresh happens, things that are not in session state will not be there anymore. But what is happening is that the code is running from top to bottom. Every time that you make a change, the entire thing is running. And that's when you need to add conditionals to tell, I want this code to run now, or I don't. So I have a slider. Now I can add a visualization, for example. But what happened is I can add a visualization that has nothing to do with my filters, or I can add a visualization that can interact with the filters. So let's add a visualization that doesn't interact with the filter first. So I am going to go to my code and I'm going to say that I want a st.bar chart. And this is going to be, let's say, balances. And let's say that the x equals, and the x is going to be, let's see our data frame here. Let's do let's do month ID or month name. So the X is going to be month, and it is case sensitive, so you have to, and you want your Y to be net balance. and we want to use data. I don't want to use the filter version. I'm just doing an overall. So if I go here now and I refresh, why are you complaining about X? Oh, I'm working on the last version of Streamlit, so it has X. So let me do a quick check here, because I want to have to stop the app for a second. Let me do a Streamlit version to make sure that I'm working with the latest version. That's my problem. But when this install 1.10. So let me do a Streamlit install. And this happens sometimes when you mess up your condes. This is exactly what happened. Streamlit, not Streamlit, pip install. 1.12. Streamlit version should be running the latest version. Why are you not running my version? You never had this many things whenever you're working a normal, but when you're demoing, oh, they all come back. Install Streamlit. Okay, I'm not gonna sweat it. Let's use the version that we have now, and I'll just adjust a couple of things. So, so I'm gonna have to authenticate again because we just started, and when you start a new session, everything that you had on session stage just goes away. Yes, thanks. Let's do a let's do roles as admin. Let's do a warehouse as ETL, WH, and MD. Let's connect to Snowflake. This is going to run that query. And obviously, I'm going to get the unexpected argument because the argument for X and Y, it is it was added, as a new thing. So I want to show you here balances, and this is going to find, if I run this, it's going to find something that makes a specification. When this happens and you don't have 1.12, I like using Altair. And Altair was a library that I was telling you that I was going to show you if we had the chance. So Altair is a really nice library. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using a bar chart, I'm going to say summary equals alt dot, and let me import Altair here. Yes, I like Altair better than Plotly because it's not figure-based. And it allows me to do quick renderings without needing the space for figuring in my memory. So I like Altair way better, and it has interoperability much better than Plotly, in my opinion. So I'm going to import Altair as alt. It's not figure-based. So when you're using Plotly or Matplotlib, you have to create a figure to then persist that figure in memory and then display it. Altair is like Streamlit. It's API based. The code ships, renders, and you don't need that figure that you need to create in memory, that shape of the visualization. So it's lighter in memory wise than Plotly. So I'm gonna say add the chart, and I'm gonna say I'm gonna use data, and then I'm gonna say mark. I'm gonna say dot mark encoding. I'm gonna say mark bar dot encode, and in the encode is where you provide the information. And I'm gonna say that my x equals, and I'm gonna say that I want, what do I wanted? I wanted the month name. Month name, or let's do the month ID because it's ordered alphabetically. And I want my y to be, and I'm gonna say that it's the sum of net balance. And this is something that Alter lets you do, is that it allows you to sum things. I'm gonna say that this one, it's a nominal value, and this one is a quantitative value, so it allows you to do this. And now I'm gonna say st.alter chart, and I'm gonna pass that summary chart to it. So when I rerun this goes in now and renders. Obviously, there's a ton of data in that chart. So let me probably display less. There's a couple, yeah. It is doing all the aggregation there. So if you see the chart is really small right now, so that's not a benefit. We need more space in our workflow. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to say, hey, st.pageconfig, set page config. I'm going to say layout equals white. And after I say layout equals white, I can come here and say use container width equals true. By doing this, when I rerun my code, I'm using the whole page for my code. Probably because I changed the layout of the page. It's going to go and put things in cache again. So just bear with me for 1 second. So now when this chart renders, it's going to use the entirety of the page. And usually it is not this low. It's probably because I am sharing my screen is looking this way. So this chart right here, we needed to use the entire width. So I don't understand why it's not using the entire width. But as you see, now we have the ranges, and this process here is taking a long time because there's a lot of data. It is doing all this, this points where it's trying to sum all the information, and that is why it's taking some time. So let's improve that. So one of the things that you can do is run it once. It's do, hey, I want this to only run once. Oh, you see now we did the whole thing where it's actually using the whole chart. Let's give it a second, because when you are sharing your screen, usually things get a little slower. So now my code is here. It's running all the time. I don't want that to happen. I can come here and say, I know that I want to generate this chart right here. I am going to take that chart and I am going to make it so it only renders one. So I am going to go here and I'm going to define a function. I'm going to say define render chart. And I'm going to pass the frame. And I'm going to say, when I grab all of this code, that I have right here, and I'm going to pass it here. Say, okay, but instead of using this, I am going to use df. And this is going to do rendering. It's going to do the same thing, but now when I say, hey, add st.cache, and I'm not going to just grab the same thing, and I want this to render only once. And now here, I'm going to say, I'm going to execute that function, render start. That's all I want. I'm going to say I want to pass data to it. Now, if I go here and rerun this thing, if my browser allows me to, for some reason it's not cooperating today. So this is rerunning. This is going to run once. Okay. But now if I make changes to this, it ran once. What happens is that if you run something once, but you don't specify how to handle this kind of situation happens. When you say run it once, it's only going to run it once, but it's not going to display it anymore. So you want to do is either add it to the cache, run it once, and then add some logic here, which with charts it tends to be a little bit more complicated, or just modify the code of your chart to process that data more gracefully. In this case, we're doing an aggregation. And if you see, we're showing a sum of everything. So we're going through a lot of data to sum it and do everything else. I could technically just grab this and instead of doing the whole aggregation, do a much simpler approach to it. Or I can include that in the filter of the data, which is what I want to do right now. What I want to do is I'm going to remove this function. I want to bring it back here to where I wanted. But then I want to use the same thing that we were using to pass the filter data and just render the filter data so we can use the same filters. So if we go here and rerun this portion, it's going to do the same rerunning, show it. And like I said, usually Altair is not this low. Streamlit itself is not this low. We're just working with a lot of data. I'm probably going to trim it down to 1,000 records or something for the rest of the demo, just to keep it a little bit more friendly. But let's do this real quick. Let's say select top 10,000 because we want the demo to, to go faster. Oh, Carlos, if you forget the store, usually that makes it. So this is running that query. It's only bringing 10,000 rows, so it's going to be a lot snappy. But now if you see, you can filter your data. And as I'm filtering my data up here, it's filtering my data up there. So I can work with my ranges and see what is my top. One of the things that I like a lot about this type of visualization is that you can layer it. So I can go here now and I can say, okay, I want to display summary, and let's say this is my summary. And now I want this to be the average, and this is going to be average. And now I want to say summary plus average, but I want this to be a line, not a bar. So if I save this code and I go back here, let me see. To see if it's average or mean, because a lot of these don't like the interactions of them. So summary plus average. So chart equals summary plus average. And let's put chart here. Okay. Say color. Yeah. So let's say that you want the color to be the month ID. So we need to make this, let's make it a bar for now. Those lines are always a little bit. And average. I think it's the order. Telling you today is not my day. Average between mix max, month ID, and I want, let's do something simpler. Let's do a count to see if it. Let me print both of them just to make sure that one is looking correct, and we'll try to pile them together afterwards. So I'm just gonna do this, render both of them right next to each other, and see, you see the count of transactions equals one or the other. Let's do a line. Okay. So in the line, this is what's not rendering. We need to have, and let me pull it from here. The definition of the encoding is slightly different. Give me 1 second. And this should be questions so far? Yeah, we could do mark row as well. Haven't used mark row yet, so yeah, that one is vertical. What I'm trying to do is create the swivel. So let me 1 second here. Let me just do simples without the aggregation, because I think that is what it is. I don't want to do mark line. And yeah, so you have your lines, that you can establish here. So you can concatenate this. You could say that you want a line on top of the other one. So if I say average plus summary, I can concatenate those lines. Obviously, it's not gonna look because they are the same color, but it allows you to concatenate one chart of the other one, but it also allows you to interact one chart with the other. But charts are good. I'm just going to leave one for the sake of it. And let's talk a little bit about layout so we can, progress through it. You have button, you have text boxes, you also have markdown text that you can paste. So if you're doing an app that shows a tutorial of how to do things, you can use things like inspect and just show markdown code in your app. But we could also do kind of generating different charts or different components based on existing things. So if we go to our chart here and I click run here, and I make sure that I have my code saved, so it has the latest code, right? And I know that I have Monday, Tuesday, and I have each day of the week. I can create individual visualizations for each day of the week. So if I say my unique values, data, and I say day of week, I believe it's called the day name, right? Day name dot unique. I get the unique set of those, which we know that is going to be Monday through Friday, right? And I can say st dot data frame, and I can show the unique days of the week. So I'm going to get here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Thursday, etc. But maybe I want to do this in a way that I can display a visualization for each day. So one of the things that I can do is say, hey, I want to sort this data and I want to create a visualization for each day of the week. So I can say for days in days unique, and let's say that I want to do an st dot write, and I want to say days, and what's the name of my column? Well, days dot values 0. And let's see, st dot write. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say list. I want to convert that to a list instead of doing. And I want to say key equals days. Because each of them needs to be unique, I need to pass a unique key. Otherwise, you're going to get a duplicate error. This is a list by definition, so I don't think I need to. Oh, I was right. It's days, value 0. If I'm passing a list, I don't need the value 0. I mean, I'm doing stupid mistakes today. Okay, so I create an st write for each of these. Well, what happened? I can say, instead of doing this, I can say st. I can say chart equal alter alt dot chart, and I can say data dot lock data day name equals days. And once I do that, I can say dot mark bar dot encode. And I can say that X equals, and let's say from this set here, we can say balance date. We want the X to be balance date. And balance date is a temporal field, so I'm going to put a T in it because it's a date. And Y equals net balance. But I want the sum of those net balances per date. And that is qualitative. So what I'm going to do with this now is that I'm going to say, okay, alt st.alt chart equals chart. The key is going to be, well, don't need a key. I'm going to say use container width equals true. And technically, I should get a chart for every, missing it. I'm going to get a Monday, a Tuesday, and I'm going to get a chart for each of those days dynamically. Balance date right now, it should be, this is all 0215. So the X, oh, there's very little values. That's why it's looking that way. Maybe it's a visualization type. It's not the proper one for this. But you can see, you can create elements that are derived from how much data you have. So if you want to create different visualizations based on how many records you got, you can do it that way. But we, instead of selecting the days of the week, we can select the months. We can say, instead of the months, I can say month name, and wherever it says month, let's say MM, and let's replace this with this. And for each month, well, balance date, sum of balance date. Is it month date? Month name. Well, it should be fine. Oh, that's what happened. Month name equals MM. Okay. So now I generated a graphic for each month of that. If you pre-sort if you do a sort values and you pre-sort your frame, then you get all your months in order. You can sort that by the month ID, which is numeric. But as you see, we can work with data that we have in the frame, and we can create visualizations, but we can also have behavior. You could group things. I could say now that I want two tabs, and I want to say, if connection is true, then I want data, well, filters, I want tables, I don't want charts, equals st.tabs. And those tabs are going to be filter, tables, and charts. First thing that I do is that I go here, click rerun to make sure that I'm running 1.10. That's why. If you were running 1.11 or greater tabs, you can divide it into multiple tabs. But since we cannot use tabs in this demo, I can do columns. I can say filter tabs and columns. I'm going to say that this is st.columns. There's going to be 3 columns. And actually, I'm going to do 2 columns because I'm going to put the charts in its own place. So I'm going to say that filters on tables are part of a chart. And now I am going to say that I want my filter. Where is my slider? So my slider is right here. I want to say with filters, and I'm gonna move my slider to one side of my my column, and I'll say with tables, and I'm gonna move my data to one side, and then I want my charts using the whole thing. So now if I go here and rerun it, my table is gonna be in this side, my chart is gonna be, my filter is gonna be in this side, and I have my charts all over. So you can play with those. One of the nicest things that this has is that you can use a tuple on the columns. So I can go on my columns, and when I have my definition, I can, instead of passing a number, I can pass a tuple and say 1/3, comma 3. What this is saying is that my second column is gonna be 3 times bigger than my first one. So if I go now and I rerun this, this is gonna be 3 times bigger than this one, and I can play with my layout and do a full application this way, okay? So part of the components, we have sliders, we have tables, data frames, we have charts, we have file uploaders. You can upload a CSV and do aggregation. So if we're gonna use pandas, I could take a CSV file and load it into Streamlit by using a file component. Today, we're not gonna go over the file components, but I do wanna show you how a file component looks. So I can go here and say st.fileuploader, upload your file. And if you do a file uploader, when you rerun this, you get a whole controller to drag and drop a file in there. And this is super helpful when you wanna do, diagrams, or you want to do something that you don't have access to a data source. You can just bring a file and parse it here. And there are many other controllers. You have st. You have an area shard, you have the expander. The expander is really cool as well. You have the columns, you have a bunch of items that you can use. You have a camera input. You can actually take photos and do parsing with all of that. Lastly, I want to show you an application built in Streamlit. So share. This is a data generator. I'm going to send the link in the chat. You guys can use it if you want. It's on my Streamlit cloud deployment, and it is free to use. So basically, this is a generator using Python, using a library called Faker. So if I need data, because I'm working on a project and I need data for some things, right? And I can come here and say, hey, I need 1,000 fields, and I'm gonna turn off the auto refresh to make it quicker, right? I'm gonna add a couple fields, and I want first name. This is gonna be type first name, last name, and this is gonna be a type of last name. I need a CD, and I'm gonna say this is a CD and a contract. This is all random data. One thing doesn't sometimes make sense to the other, but it works fine, right? I'm gonna click generate data. When I click generate data, this goes and generates you 1,000 records distinct. I can click now, download a CSV, and I generated that CSV data here, okay? So right now, if we go back to my, here, I have my uploader, I'll say file path equals st file uploader. I can say now that my CSV equals pd.read CSV and say file path. But what happens is that you want to know if file path is not null. So if file path is not none, okay, then you want that CSV, and you want to then paste a CSV here, okay? So now if we go back to your app, you're gonna have your component here. I can drag the CSV, drop it here, and I'm reading that CSV straight with Streamlit, the CSV that I just generated in my app on the other side. So this is really quick. If you need to wrangle data, you can write your own wrangling. You can write your own your own structures to do a lot of things using Streamlit. So in Snowflake, we internally have been writing a ton of applications internally, because sometimes our clients want to do very specific things. So we just go for the client and write. I think I wrote like 17 applications so far, just testing different stuff. But you can write your own wrangling. Sometimes we need to parse a quick file. I mean, the drag and drop, all it does is get the path and facilitate dropping something on the website. So if you do that, you can just, not only wrangle the data, but you can aggregate it. You have the read CSV, read JSON. So on my generator here, if I select JSON, I can then, show that data as a JSON. So I'm going to turn on the auto refresh. I have that JSON file. I could technically take this JSON file, drop it here, and say here if path like JSON, parse the JSON file. If not, parse a CSV, and you can read back a CSV file in a JSON file. This uploader that I show you guys, I've used it for every demo. I just go generate random data, put it in. The 2 million records that you're seeing today, I did it using this thing. I just generate 2 million records, put it in, generate 10,000 at a time. I just put it in a loop and generate 2 million records for it. But we have the option of doing a lot of cool things, and this is fully Streamlit. This, being able to do dynamic logic and add things as you need, and create your own apps, deploy them locally, deploy them to Docker. It's a really useful tool. In the future, you're going to be able to run Streamlit directly inside the Snowflake interface. So you're going to be able to write apps to interact with your Snowflake data within living Snowflake. So that is a cool feature coming up. It was announced at Summit. It's part of our native apps applications development that is being done right now. And we all can't wait to get Streamlit and Snowflake and start developing apps directly in our clients' data. Questions?
While we wait for questions, I have 3 questions for you.
Yes.
So regarding to the limits, right? We have a 200 megabytes of limits, and this data is being cached, right? What happens if we reach that limit? What will happen in that scenario with this? I mean, will it fail, or will it use some other resource? Will I need to upgrade?
So it depends on what you're doing. For example, a lot of internal apps, they do when you do the st.cache, you can do persist equals disk, and you can specify a place on your app server to spool temporary storage of that data. So you can just work with that data locally and not reach Snowflake. Depends on what you're doing. Honestly, if you're working with Snowflake, it's different, because in Snowflake, we cache your query, in the results cache. So it takes milliseconds for the same query to come back. But if you're doing some crazy calculation that will not prevent that from caching, then that's different. That will either buffer it in a file or buffer it in some extended cache. There's also, cache decorators for Python that you can use to cache data that are not Streamlit based. So if you use PyCache or any decorator from Python per se to store that, you could use that as well. I have a question from Geoff. Says, what are the conditions that stop the DB connection settings from rerunning? It is this code right here that says st.cache. There is st.cache and that is st.memo. They both do very similar jobs. Basically, you're telling Streamlit, I want you to cache the result of this function. Don't run them away until I force it. Other than using st.cache, you can pass what is called a hash function to st.cache. For example, some people cache a column on their frame, and if that column changes, then it knows that it needs to start running that query again. So you can specify what is the hashing key to avoid it to rerun. In this case, we're just doing a very general cache. It's like, don't rerun it ever. but you can specify how to tell Streamlit if it has to run it again.
That's awesome.
Okay, questions?
If you want to go on mute, raise a hand or drop the question in the chat, comments. How cool is this?
You said that you had 3 questions. You have
Oh yes, they were related to the cache, but you answered them on the go. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For this example, the demo that you did, you only spend money when you run the query, right? The first time when you connect it to the warehouse, you brought the query, and that was it. The charge. Talking about fees.
The charge on Snowflake is when you run that query in Snowflake, and if you have your warehouse set to 5 minutes, then you're gonna get billed that first minute of the query and whenever the idle time. But yeah, this the fact that you can write all these apps for using just Python,
Right.
and how it is very, very, very easy to learn. The curve, honestly, I found that the curve is not. If you know how to manipulate pandas and you know how to manipulate Python, it is very simple. And yes, I will share the code that we wrote today so you guys can use it. But yeah,
are you creating this on your website? Do you have your website handy to share?
I don't have this code on my GitHub yet, but I will upload it to my GitHub and give it to you so you can put it on the description when you upload the video to YouTube. Okay.
Okay, so let's share that after then.
Yeah. So I'll make sure that I can share it with you so you can put it on the description for it.
Yes.
Installation is really simple. Like every other library in Python, it has its caveats, but one of the nicest things about Streamlit is that the Streamlit community is very active. If you have a question, post it on the Streamlit community and someone will answer it. If you find an issue that needs to be resolved, post it there and someone will tell you if it is in the roadmap. It is really, really helpful, the fact that the community is so engaged. And since the acquisition, it has been kind of crazy. It's been there's been a lot of hype about Streamlit. But yeah, you can show things conditionally. You can use your if statements to kind of, like you see here, we're using a for loop to generate, conditional items and just render things as we go. So you don't have to declare things in a very explicit way. You can tell it whether to render something or not. And you can get a full app behavior, with this. Any other questions, comments?
I see 2 people are writing. Victor, who cannot talk, he says thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you very, very much for this presentation and demos. There is another question there.
Yes, I use NoCon. I put it in session state because session state is very helpful to preemptively declare something. So if I know that I'm going to reference something in the future, but I need to have a conditional override, I usually put it in session state to make sure that my code doesn't complain of an object used before being declared. So it is really helpful to preemptively declare things. Hey, Jesus, thank you very much.
Yeah, by the way, you already said this, but Carlos has his own channel. He posts a lot on YouTube, on his Instagram. Amazing content there. So be sure that you visit and subscribe.
Thank you very much. These are my QR codes. If you want to scan them, that'll take you straight to those. Those who don't follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn, feel free to give me a follow. I do answer questions whenever I have a chance. I know some people here that has stopped by before. I'm more than welcome to help you as much as I can. And yeah, it's I think Streamlit on Snowflake is going to be it's going to be a great combination. It's going to open a lot of doors to go beyond the normal dashboard and add interactive objects and interactive experiences to it. And I like the fact that you can create a data app, not a data presentation. So Thank you very much all for attending today. Thank you, Cecilia, for having me today here. And off to the next one.